Hi, this is a continuation of lesson 3.2 with the product and quotient rules. One of the things you can do with the quotient rule is we can use it to develop new rules. So we're going to do 4 new derivative rules, and at the end, these are going to be things you need to memorize. The result are things you need to memorize. So we're going to start with, how do you find the derivative of tangent? So at first glance, we don't know how to do that. None of our rules apply. But we're going to rewrite it, and we'll rewrite tangent as a quotient. Because, of course, tangent is equal to sine over cosine. Now it's a quotient, and it's pretty easy to use our quotient rule, which you remember is the bottom times the derivative of the top minus the top times the derivative of the bottom, all over the bottom squared. We're going to simplify this a little bit because it's going to give us a formula we want to use in the future. So the top, of course, becomes cosine squared plus sine squared over cosine squared, and you say, oh, I know u cosine squared plus sine squared. U are equal to 1, and then you remember that the reciprocal of cosine is secant, and so this, of course, is secant squared. This is going to give us a new rule. You need to know that the derivative of tangent of t is going to be secant squared of t. So let's put that in a box. That's going to need to go in your study guide, etc. Let's do the next one. We want to find the derivative of secant as well. So again, we're going to rewrite secant so that it's a quotient. So we're going to use the quotient rule here. The derivative is going to be the bottom times the derivative of the top. 1 is a constant, so its derivative is 0, minus the top times the derivative of the bottom, over the bottom squared. Let's simplify that. Our numerator is positive sine of a over cosine squared. There are actually many ways you can simplify this, but a fairly standard one in calculus is to separate this into sine over cosine times 1 over cosine, which can be written as secant times tangent. Notice I switched the order in that last one. So again, this is one we want to remember and memorize. So to go on the study guide, the derivative of secant is going to be secant tan. Put a box around that one too. We'll do 2 more of these. They're very similar to the other 2. Cosecant can be rewritten as the reciprocal of sine. We'll use the quotient rule one more time. So the derivative is the bottom times the derivative of the top minus the top times the derivative of the bottom over the bottom squared. And again, we'll simplify this. So the top is negative cosine x over sine squared we'll split that up in a similar fashion. and we'll rewrite that as negative cosecant cotangent. So this also deserves a box, and we say the derivative of cosecant x will be negative cosecant cotangent. Our very last one, cotangent, which is going to work the same way as our first one did. Cotangent is cosine over sine, and our quotient rule gives us the bottom times the derivative of the top minus the top times the derivative of the bottom over the bottom squared. And this time we have negative sine squared minus cosine squared, which is also very nice. We'll just factor out the -1, and this is sine squared plus cosine squared, which of course is 1. So we've got negative 1 over sine squared, which is negative cosecant squared. Those are the 4 trig derivatives you'll need to add to your list of things to memorize. The last thing to notice is some relationships between your trig derivatives. So we said the derivative of sine is cosine, and the derivative of cosine is negative sine. We said the derivative of tangent is secant squared, and the derivative of cotangent is negative cosecant squared. Lastly, the derivative of secant was secant tan, and the derivative of cosecant is negative cosecant cotangent. So you may notice that each of our primary trig functions is related to the derivative of its cofunction. The derivatives of the cofunctions are all negative, and the formula is the same, except the functions have been changed into cofunctions. So for example, this is negative, not cosine, but sine. This is negative, not secant squared, but cosecant squared. And this is negative, not secant times tan, but cosecant times cotangent. So that might help you remember those formulas.